You're listening to Mr. Liverpool himself, Frank Carlyle, exclusively on Mersey Radio.
Good evening, everybody. That was a Young Girl by, I think he's absolutely brilliant, Gary Puckett. Anyway, that's enough of that. So it's me, Frank Carlyle, for Mersey Radio. It's going to be a very, very eventful evening tonight because we're talking about culture. And then with me tonight, we've got the one and only Paul Kappa.
Hi, Frank.
How's it going?
Good, I'm waiting for the culture shock.
Oh, so am I. I think we're all waiting for culture shocks. And I also the lovely, wonderful, and my little dream girl herself, Laura Gilchrist. Hello, Laura.
Oh, all right, Frank.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Just getting used to this handheld mic here.
Well, this is it, you see. It's a disgrace, to be honest. I think John O'Hare, who's also with us, should, Hello, John.
Hello, Frank. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's good to be here. I'm glad you're there, John, because being a historian like myself, we'll have lots to talk about tonight.
I hope so.
And a lot of culture.
Culture, interesting topic.
Of other countries, we might add, so
It'll be all
it's
right.
going to be fab. And also here, right facing me, is Mr. Wonderful himself, Gilchrist.
Do you know, how can anyone live with all these adulation? You know, from Frank, Mr. Wonderful.
I quite like it, Ed.
All right, then. All right, so I'll see if I can get used to it. But hi, guys. Hi, Frank. Thanks for being here.
Well, it's just a pleasure, as you know, boys and girls, because we've got this culture thing coming up, which is going to be great, because we have David Johnson on all the way from Colorado. He'll be on, we'll be talking lots about culture, especially in America as well, don't forget. And what I want to talk about is about when we went over there, from the likes of Columbus, right? From the likes of the white man getting into the indigenous people and how they had to succumb to them, so to speak, going right up to the 19th century where they had wars, didn't they? They had wars with the white man as they were infiltrating the indigenous grounds, shall we say. Anyway, we've also got great music. We've got music from the Beatles.
Who are they?
Exactly. And we've got When the Moon Hits Your Eye Like a Bigger Pizza Pie, that's amore.
Makes me hungry, that.
What?
It makes me hungry, that song.
Does it? Really? A bigger pizza pie, yes. Mamma mia. Anyway, we've got Dean Martin anyway, singing the wonderful piece there. That's amore. And Stuck in the Middle, Steelers Wheel, Drove All Night, The Big O, Sorrow by the Mersey Beats.
Oh, great tune.
Isn't it just one of the great tunes anyway? And who did the cover version?
Bowie? David Bowie, was it?
Bowie, yeah. And is it Bowie or Bowie? What is it?
Yeah.
I thought the Americans say Bowie.
You do, don't you? Yeah.
I say Bowie because he
I say Bowie.
Let's call the whole thing off.
But what is it though? What is it? Is it Bowie or Bowie?
I think it's
both.
It is.
Both,
It's
isn't it?
Whichever you like.
Yeah.
Oh, is it
It's
either
a
or?
cultural question.
See, the thing is as well, it was his son's name was Zowie.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
changing
yeah.
now, isn't it?
Zowie
Yeah.
Bowie.
Zowie Bowie, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Zoe Bowie. No,
No,
Zowie.
I understood
Zowie
it.
Bowie.
Understood that he took the name from the knife, the Bowie knife, which most people say is a Bowie knife.
Bowie knife,
yeah.
Bowie
But
knife.
so I
Bowie
think
knife.
it probably should be Bowie, but I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter, does
I
it?
wonder
I've always said Bowie.
whatever he called himself would be the right one, but that's.
But it was if you're, Cambridge.
I think it's Bowie.
I remember him telling me over a beer.
Oh, there we go. Name dropping and everything else. Especially, when you...
He's making it up.
I don't believe it.
I don't believe it.
Listen. It's a show. It's not like a little free-for-all around a table or whatever. Anyway.
Entertainment
is right. But what we've got anyway is this wonderful thing. I've got to mention Serrano Dan or Chirano Dan. Now the point is
Dan.
it? Hang on, see, I can't finish nothing. I cannot finish nothing on this show. Anyway, we've got Serrano Den. Now, is it Serrano Den or is it Chirano Den?
Danny.
Serrano.
Oh, come on,
Serrano, yeah, Serrano. Serrano is the same way as Serrano Bergerac, isn't it?
Yeah, Serrano Bergerac.
Serrano Den is an anagram of his actual name. Yeah. So he's like, he calls himself the Kaiser Souse of the Liverpool art scene. For anybody who knows that film to reference.
Well, the thing is, you see, the thing is, if you're Italian, you'd say Chirano. Hey, a Chirano Den. Absolutely. Okay. That's why I said, you know, was it Chirano or was it Serrano? But what a name anyway, and what an artist. And we have to mention that on Friday the 11th of August between 6 and 9:30, which we're all going, by the way. I think Paul Kappa will be there, won't he, for some reason?
I'll be in attendance.
Well, he's actually playing, Paul.
I'll be doing that as well.
I know. Anyway, the exhibition runs for 6 weeks. From Saturday the 12th, Barry Sutton and the Beatnik Hurricane are also playing live on Saturday the 19th at between 2 and 4, and it's all at the ABC Liverpool 169 Victoria Street, right opposite the Shankly Hotel, and it's going to be great. And the thing is about that particular place, I know who actually built it. A fella named John Carlyle built it.
Any relation, Frank?
No, it's spelt differently. And if you look up, you'll see gargoyles. Not many people know that. Right. Anyway, that's just a little piece of history there. So, it's... tell you what, I'm getting funny looks here. I'm going to go over to... the wonderful Dean Martin or Dino. Do you know what Dean Martin's proper name was, by the way? Have you any idea?
Was it Dino Martin?
Oh, Martini. Yeah, I could say like a Dino Martini. Well, his name was Dino Cricchetti. Cricchetti. And the Cricchettis came through Liverpool. Did you know that? Well, there you go.
Where did they originate?
They came from Napoli. The Napoli.
Where the big pizza pies come from.
That's right. And you know why they had the pizza pies, by the way? Have you any idea why? I'm going to tell you why. This is from my family. My own familia, right? And what it was, the people were actually hungry and everything else because there was terrible droughts. So they got the least of things. And they made like a dough, you know, for bread. For bread, I mean, but it was they never had enough moisture or whatever it was, and it was all like stretchy and everything else. So they decided then to put fruits on it, and little bits of meat, what they could find, and bits of these other vegetables, and they cooked it like that, and bits of cheese as well, by the way. And that's how the pizza, just to feed themselves.
It's interesting, isn't it, Frank? Because even on the cultural thing that we're talking about, because that was Italian street food. Like it's quite a poor man's dish that sort of like exploded into our popular culture now. It's like you pay a fortune for pizza in some of these fancy places, don't you now?
Well, I think that's wonderful. I'll tell you for why, Paul. Because it is a street food, and you can go anywhere. You can go to Singapore, or you can go to Hong Kong. You can go anywhere now, even down in London, and you're getting the street food, aren't you, really? Yeah. And that's the way it was in Italy. That's the way it was. Point is, of everything, is the cultures that have actually come into the likes of our country and every other countries, they open up restaurants, don't they? They actually open up the restaurants. And there are some that fail and some that thrive. And especially around New York, for example. Like back here in Liverpool, we had a place known as Little Italy, and that's where all the Italians lived when they came over. And my mother said, you know, when you walk down Little Italy, it was wonderful because what you heard with the mandolins, you heard the gramophones. If anyone had a gramophone, you'd hear Caruso singing, the opera, and all the smells and everything else from what they're cooking.
So the ice cream and the gelati.
Gelati, molto gelati. It was absolutely brilliant. The different tastes, everything. So you can imagine all the wonderful Italian culture, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, most probably, and especially about Liverpool, by the way, because I think one of the greatest of all quotes came from the 2008 Capital of Culture, and it was some woman that she just put in this quote, something about the Capital of Culture. There was a little competition, and she said, the world in one city. I thought that was absolutely fabulous, and it is, isn't it? We are the world in one city, and don't forget, we don't look in, we look out. We actually look out, and there's a reason for that. Anyway, that's Amore we love, and the wonderful Dino Cricchetti, or Dean Martin as we all know.
The best in 60s and 70s music, plus a little bit of history. Tune into Frank Carlyle every Monday at 8 p.m, here only on Mersey Radio.
When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore. Excuse me, but you see back in old Napoli, that's amore. Well, anyway, that was for Mo, because she said, would you kindly sing it, Frank? So I'll just give a little rendition of Amore. Thanks very much, Mo, for making a fool out of me in front of millions of listeners. Anyway, that's enough of that, and let's back to the show. And we've got David Johnson on, haven't we? Is David listening in? All right. Oh, okay. The mentions. I've got to mention. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's Mose who's just been mentioned. Maureen Gibbons has just been mentioned as well, and also Mark Kinnish. And Mark Kinnish actually said, "What did you think about the fiasco in St John's Gardens over the weekend? Absolutely madness," he said. So, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? And also, we've got to mention, dare I say, Pish Marley. And Pish Marley's listening in all the way from Canada. And Pish has this wonderful thing for us, and it's Billy No Mates. And it's a little series of what Billy's up to during the time he's with us. It's absolutely hilarious, and people love it, actually. They say, where is Billy? Why isn't Billy back on? Well, Pish will be working on some scripts anyway. So, that's that. Excuse me. That's the Dean Martin coming out of me. I put a lump in my throat. So Sarah, Laura, will you help me out here?
He didn't warm up, Frank.
Oh, is that the warm up? Yeah. Does Kappa ever do that? When he's warming up, does he ever have a little cough?
He gargles.
He gargles.
George Harrison used to gargle.
Yeah, well, he gargles with lager, doesn't he? It's a fine medicine, as they say.
No, it's a pint of creme de menthe.
Hey. Oh, a pint of creme de menthe. Oh, well, that's it then, isn't it?
What the anyway. Drinks.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going right over to Colorado and Professor David Johnson. Good evening, David.
Good evening, how are you, Frank?
I'm fine, thanks, and we've got the wonderful group of arms which we're going to talk about culture, of all things, and, the different aspects and the different, shall we say, say like America, for example, right now, because we'll be going back to the indigenous American native, shall we say, a little bit later on, but like today, David, with the different cultures in America, you see it on the news, don't you? You see the president of the United States wants to build a wall right across the American border to keep out Mexicans. Is that the right way to go about assimilating culture in America?
Yeah, well, I think I have lots of thoughts about this. Actually, let's see which one wants to come out first. I want to say, I think, first that the whole idea of America as, the melting pot metaphor that gets used, that's rubbish. It's never been a melting pot, because if you think about what a melting pot is supposed to do, you take all these bits and you throw them in, and you're supposed to come up with some new unified whole. And we don't do that. This country doesn't do that well, and it's never done that well. It's more like a patchwork quilt. I think we got bits and pieces here and there, but they're only bound almost geographically and not necessarily culturally. So I don't know that we are particularly good at assimilating, but related to that, I was really thinking, and I'd really like to know what you think of this, because, I'm immersed in this country, for better or for worse. What actually is American culture?
Well, this is it, because when I hate using the word discovery, of other countries, because there's already people there, if you understand what I mean. Because it wasn't discovered. It wasn't not discovered. The indigenous people were already there. Anyway, when they finally got to America and they started to change the face of the land of America, so to speak, and I hate calling them Indians, to be honest, because they're not Indians, are they, really? It's just an afterthought of, India itself. So, but
can I mention something on that, though?
Yeah, go on.
Because it just, we've got, Colorado has a fairly good mix of different tribal affiliations here, and actually we've got, not too far from here, we've got a couple different Ute reservations, but, and I've done a little bit with a Native American dance group here, and I'll tell you that I know exactly what you're saying. No, it's not India. Columbus was totally lost. He needed a better navigator. But at the same time, if a Native American, if you will, an indigenous person in this country does not know what the tribal affiliation of another Native American is, they will still use the term Indian to address one another. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily quite as un-PC as it might.
Yeah. What do you think?
I was just I think that he's right about the melting pot thing. It just I don't think there's a melting pot culture anywhere in the world.
No, there isn't.
I think that it is like a patchwork is a great description. I think diversity, a culture of diversity, is quite an important description too, and it does describe, from microcosm like our city here in Liverpool is I would say is quite a diverse culture in Liverpool, distinct and diverse, and hopefully integrated to a large degree. I think in America you've got a huge diverse population, mostly integrated, but in some areas like the South, I think if I'd suggest the South, it's not so well integrated as in other parts. Maybe David could jump in on that.
Can I ask you why?
Yeah.
No, why would you think that the South isn't more integrated?
I think the history of the South is much more
volatile.
I think it's more present. I think the past is more present in the South still.
Okay, so it's more. It's likely to. It's volatile, so it's likely to explode.
It's changing, and I think it's maybe volatile is a strong word, but I think it's more recent that it's had to try to integrate different cultures.
Okay, well, I think Paul wants to come in there.
Yeah, not so much about the melting pot in the sense of either language or racial, but certainly from the point of view, my point of view as a musician, I think it is. I think America is a fantastic example of a melting pot, because I think you're talking about, where they talk about hillbillies, which I think might refer back to the old sort of Irish, the William of Orange sort of thing. They call them billies in the end, and they were living in the hills. But you've got the blacks, and they've got the exodus of the blacks who had been very poor in cotton fields, moving up to Chicago. To make a really eclectic mix of music, and of course you've got the French down in Louisiana, which makes that sort of Cajun Zydeco, and and then Hawaii putting in a certain amount of quite a lot of influence from Hawaiian music in there. I think you've got a real more so than anywhere else I can think in the world, as a single country, has produced a music culture which really is a very diverse melting pot, and I think that's one of the greatest cultural gifts of America to the world.
Well, thanks very much, because I was going to I was going to come into music, you see. I don't know about you, David, but what do you think about the musical cultural thing in America? Do you agree with Paul that it's, it's the best in the world?
I would agree to an extent that the United States has done a better job of fusing different kinds of music into acceptable output. Where you mentioned the hillbilly, all right, and that, that's a very charged word in this country in some ways, because there's some people that see it as very as a derogatory term, and there's some people
un-PC, isn't it, really?
Well, but there's people that really embrace it. The idea of I'm a proud redneck, and that's just, I don't even know what you do with that. But
I just wanted to say hillbilly was more like looking at the etymology of it, about how that word arrived, because you're probably looking at mountains around Kentucky or something like that with, Anglo-Scots-Irish. I'm just wondering whether the term must be a very old term, so it's not. I don't mean it in any derogatory sense. I just mean literally what it was and the etymology of the phrase.
Oh, and I didn't take it in that way at all. No. I didn't. But more a sense of that. That very idea is why I'm suggesting perhaps that it's not such a melting pot. I'm willing to concede that the music, that we do have a pretty good mix. If you go to any major city in the United States, you're going to find every kind of possible music you can imagine. There'll be jazz and fusion and classic rock and techno, stuff that sounds like a bad modem failing, and I don't know what all. But the very fact that this country can't agree on what some of these words mean, these identifiers, is why I'm suggesting that it's not as much of a melting pot as you might think.
Yeah, well, that's what Ed came out with before, because he said that what you said was a great analogy, a quilted, what is it? Patchwork quilt. Yeah, I couldn't get it out there.
I think if I can just say, just to reinforce that, I think the patchwork quilt is really great, because it's a single object that contains identifiable colours, elements, and I think America and large cultures like America, like Britain, is a single object that contains identifiable pieces, but they're all interconnected.
And that's identifiably an American quilt.
Yeah,
in fact.
Yeah.
And also, if you look at the structure of America geographically, there are 50 different states. It's amazing when you were teaching American history, American politics, you're saying to students, listen, this is the United States. It isn't one country. It never has been. And it's a variety of things, really, that you've got between north and south, east and west. You've also got the country versus the suburbia. You've got on top of that the different racial groupings, from Hispanic going through to black. America is extremely diverse, I'd say, rather than United State. And they all have different ambitions and different directions and different cultures within the culture of an umbrella of the United States. Funny with the music, you're saying about the divergence. There's a unity, because obviously through blues and country, a combination of white and black music, you get rock and roll, and obviously the progression chronologically of music to the modern day. However, as early as the 70s, you have kind of like Neil Young's Southern Man, really as an embodiment of what all the bad things about the South were. Just after the 60s, where you had a lot of kind of uprising, and the 70s started to slow down a little bit, and then you have the reaction to that, Lynyrd Skynyrd and Tom Petty with Southern Accents album, saying, hold on a minute, we are back with this image of us like playing banjos and and doing things to Ned Beatty is completely wrong, and it's just the forward face. And Dallas, if you look at it in the 70s, was the fastest growing economic and social area in the States at the time for 10 years.
Well, I think you're right there, because when the likes of vaudeville was going on, Jordan, it was really took off. in America during the 19th century, and you had these singers blackened up.
Minstrels,
blackened up, and so they were poking fun really at the blacks, and with the banjos and everything else. Then it just moved on, and as you said, it went into the hills, because I blame also for all this, shall we say, bad feeling, and it was bad feeling, especially by us when you watch films like Deliverance and you go, whoa, getting into the hills of eyes, and you go, whoa, hang on a minute, is this what it's really like in mid-America? Do you understand?
You sure got a pretty mouth, boy.
Well, this is it.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you it's not, okay?
We just get that.
Go on, David.
He's selling us off. He's selling me off.
Yeah.
Go on, David. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm just saying that, as a go on.
Isn't that funny though? That there's this image that it's in the United States, and I think it is global too. And it always comes down to the South, doesn't it? The American South and the deep South, right? Down in Georgia. That. Yeah, I think it was John said something earlier that the South is more. There's more tension. I don't know if the word volatile is entirely right, but there's more tension in the South because the South the country really, as a whole, never really recovered from the American Civil War, but it's more fresh in the South. And so there is still a great deal more ongoing, even in 2017, a great deal more ongoing struggle to assert racial and to some extent class position
is identity for the South.
And it's just that's what you're going to run into a lot more than crocodiles and somebody playing a banjo as you slowly float down a river. You might run into a crocodile. I can't say that, but.
David, I've actually been in Georgia, and I was in a house. I was sitting at a very, very nice house overlooking some woods, and I could hear people playing banjos, and there was some smoke coming up from the woods.
You didn't have a canoe, did you?
Just start to think at that point.
It is a funny thing, though, Dave, because as you say, a lot of this thing about the South and the North, it does stem from the Civil War, and before that, very agricultural South, very industrial North, and after that, destruction of the South. Although they put up a plucky fight, it's that identity, isn't it, really? They've lost so much. And, of course, Frank will tell you about the Liverpool's connections to the South and all the glorious, new Romanic sort of embodiment of ladies and gentlemen in the new Colosseum, very genteel. There's a fantastic book called North and South, and if you read that, there's so much detail about how cultured and advanced the South were. When we talk about culture, and it's all destroyed after they burned Virginia, and Richmond.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we've talked in other programs about some of the Civil War connections to Liverpool and the Confederate embassy that was there and whatnot. So, yeah, it's a really strong connection there. I think that do you know? In the wake of the Civil War, there was a period called Reconstruction, and do you know what the condition was for a southern state to get readmitted to the Union? Do you know what the requirements were to say, okay, you're forgiven, come on back and be part of the United States again?
Go on.
Hello? What?
Yeah, go on.
No, we don't. Please tell us.
No, we're listening. That's what we said. Go on.
Oh, okay. I heard
we don't know.
Okay, good. Well, then it's education time. Huzzah!
Yeah.
Bizarre. Go on, David. You're doing great.
The North occupied the South, right? So it was a military occupation, and all of the southern states had to convene a government, and it had to be none of the people that were in the government during the Civil War. So you got to round up all these people, and they had three conditions that were imposed on them. They had to ratify the 13th Amendment, which said you can't have slavery anywhere in the country anymore. Had to ratify the 14th Amendment, which is a hodgepodge of civil rights guarantees and a war debt clause that has caused all kinds of problems. But then the third thing is they had to have a popular vote to get a certain percentage of the state to say, yes, we agree to these things, and we're going to be good little citizens from now on. And you think, okay, so we're going to set the popular vote. You got to have at least 50% or something like that. But it wasn't. It was 10%. So you only had to have 10% of your state vote, yes, we're going to be good, and you're back. But that leaves 90% potentially still really cross about what just happened. And that's the legacy. That's why there's the South will rise again nonsense that's going on in this country.
And of course, since then you've had the banning of the Confederate flag as well, which is another sign of the view that it's institutionally racist in the South. And I'm sure some people are. It's like everywhere in the world. Some people are, some people aren't. And that 13th Amendment as well is now considered to have been weaponized because it doesn't include people who are incarcerated, does it? The banning of slavery, but if you're in jail, it doesn't count.
Yeah, and actually that's that's still an issue right now because Colorado just had a vote last year about the state interpretation of that bit of the federal constitution, and that kind of goes back to the whole idea of every state has a degree of independence on what it's going to do. I mean, Colorado's got legal marijuana; it's still federally controlled, but we can go right out and get it, which is a real enticement for some people to come and visit, I guess. But it's just the legacy is still with us, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
David, you mentioned the 10% and the 90% thing a minute ago. Do you have an idea of how they did in fact vote? So you said that the limit was 10%, that's all they needed. Did they actually get some states with only 10% voting and getting in?
Actually I don't in memory know that, but I know that there's a lot of historical sources that I am familiar with where many southern whites in particular were very direct, and they said, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, you Yankees have whipped us well and good, but wait until the troops leave and you'll see our true colors again. And that's very much what happened. I mean, as soon as Reconstruction ended and the federal troops were withdrawn, that's when you have the first rise of the Ku Klux Klan and the just skyrocketing in the lynchings and the horrors that come up for most of a century, actually. So I don't know the numbers, but I would guess most of them are pretty close to that line, but I can look it up.
Yeah, just one more little question on that. It's probably the lead into a very big question, but maybe just give a quick answer to this. The differences between, or let's say the origins of the South and the North, were they? I always believed that they came from the same origins, that there were Native Americans North and South, and that the white population in North and South basically came from the same sources around the world. Am I wrong in that? And if I'm right, what were the differences between the North and the South that actually caused the trouble?
Okay, so that's. I mean, that is kind of a big question. I'll be succinct about it, but it is a misconception to say that they're coming from the same source. They are very different, and it goes back to the way the British colonies were established throughout the early history of the colonial period, where the northern colonies were established really for two purposes. One was very much commercial. Jamestown was a commercial settlement, and it was intended to produce a return to England. And then, of course, we've got the well-enshrined story in the United States of the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and all that. So you've got the religious colonies. But the South was set out from the very beginning to be agricultural. The South is where tobacco and cotton were the mainstays almost from the start. And so they attracted different people. You had to have a certain amount of wherewithal and resources to be able to go and start working in the South, whereas the North tended to have a lot more people coming over maybe on the margins of society, where maybe even as an indentured servant. And so that's part of the split, is there was already an aristocratic leaning in the southern plantations from the colonial period. Yeah. Whereas the Benjamin Franklin American ingenuity identity was really more northern, and so it goes way back, and it does play out in the way, you talked about the perception of the aristocracy in Liverpool, and that's why, because there's a much longer train of it in the south.
Well, the thing is, what you mentioned in Jamestown there, that was the very first settlement, wasn't it, at Roanoke. Now the point, well, it's named after James the First. That's Jamestown, that's why it was named there. Now the point is, with the likes of that, and it's how the white person treated, shall I say, the indigenous native of America, and they used them as, shall I say, more or less slaves, because when the white man was there, they didn't go hunting. The very first lot landed in Virginia in 1586, and it was through Sir Walter Raleigh. He sent these planters over, and it just failed miserably. The actual people who landed there, they just disappeared, but they expected the indigenous people to go and hunt for them and go and fish for them, and while they just sat back, they never had a clue how to settle in a new land. And you mentioned religion, and that's why the likes of Sir Humphrey Gilbert sent people over in 1566 over to America, and it failed so miserably that and it was only through religion, because they turned around, the English turned around and said, well, there's the Spanish are preaching the devil's religion. That means Catholicism. So let's send somebody over and teach them the true religion, which is Protestantism. And that's why over there now in America, you've got the WASP, haven't you? You've got the WASP, the White Anglo-Saxon Protestant in America, very prevalent over there. But it's very historical, the way Jamestown abounded. Have you ever heard of a chief by the name of Powhatan?
Oh, yeah.
Now, Powhatan had a daughter, didn't he, Pocahontas? And you had America, unfortunately, American Hollywood, Hollywood doing this animated film about Pocahontas marrying John Smith, which was absolutely ridiculous, because she married a fella named John Rolfe, who was a tobacco merchant, and he just wanted land. So he asked, it was the very first interracial, shall I say, marriage on the planet.
Yeah, it didn't work out too well for Pocahontas either,
No. It didn't. But, well, anyway, what we'll get back to, what you were saying about, the Civil War and everything else, and how they, just gave them like 10% of everything, and the other 90% were fuming at the mouth. It happened here, very similar to Northern Ireland, when the six counties of Northern Ireland was formed after the breakaway of the Republic, because right up to the 70s, say like a Catholic household had 5 adults living in there. At voting age, only one adult could vote. Yet, living next door, a non-Catholic household, and there's 5 adults living there. It was, they could all vote. So again, it's like civil rights, and they had no civil rights, and that had been going on for many, many years, ever since 1566, when Sir Humphrey Gilbert went over to Ireland. They never had any rights. So again, it's how they rule. It's the rule of everything. It's like the media, and Paul wants to come in to say about how Liverpool was through the culture of media.
I got to thinking about we were talking about the perception of the South, for good or for ill, and I thought that it was unusual that I can't really think of any other place in England or the British Isles that has, with the Scousers, that there's a perception of us as sort of vagabonds and thieves and largely unemployed. I can't think of any, and that's been entirely, I think, probably since the 1980s. I think, especially since that decline.
I'm uneducated, by the way. Uneducated.
Yeah.
Every one of us, supposedly, David, are illiterate.
But I can't think of other areas of our country where people actually sort of are so derogatory about the...
Essex is the only one I can think of.
Yeah, maybe so.
The females especially think to be thick or kind of dance on handbags, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, more stupid and uncultured. Yeah. But I mean, actually, like we get the criminal kind of thing elements. As well. Yeah, that's the.
But it seems to be, as you say, it's more like the mid '70s and the early '80s. You get almost that sort of image from the Thatcherite sort of point of view. And I remember when my dad, who's a design engineer, used to plastics expert for making cars, and they went down to London about '82. And him and his team of experts were down there, and they were dealing with, I think it was one particular car manufacturer, a German one. And the fellow who's the director took him to the top of the building. It was a skyrise in London, and they went, "Look at that! Isn't that marvellous? Isn't that? What do you think of that? Isn't that beautiful?" My dad and his mates were looking at each other, going, "What are we looking at?" And the guy generally thought that we were all living in shanty town. It was always like, well, criminals, you couldn't go out overnight after 6 o'clock. He genuinely believed that, and it's frightening because we all grew up or were around in that particular point in time, maybe the exception of Laura. But
yeah, not making
I remember it being you could go into town. I've never seen anybody get mugged or anything at all. It was quite busy. The shops were full. Just this perception is just bizarre. When we go to university, same thing. Oh, from Liverpool. It was like you thought that you were the worst in the world, or you were from. The streets were paved with broken glasses and robbers.
Well, they often talked about it as if it was riots, that the riots that started with the discontent following the unemployment with the Thatcher regime, if you like, but that I think the first riot was actually in Brixton, I think.
It was, yeah.
And then it sort of moved steadily
Bristol,
up north.
No, it was in Bristol.
Was it Bristol?
Bristol it started.
It wasn't us anyway.
No, it wasn't us. It was far from being us. No. But every time, and I was going to come in there actually, because every time that riots, the 80s riots, it's always Liverpool, the Tox that riots, and it's always comes up. Why don't they say the Bristol riots? Why don't they say the London riots?
Target, yeah. I think also you got to be remember. I think there is something about the Liverpool riots were particularly bad because I know somebody who was involved in government circles and the civil service at the time, and had said that when the riots were going on, they were getting closer and closer to the main police station in St Anne's, and if they got there, the issue was they're going to send the army in, and that because all the criminal records and data were stored there, and it was like they couldn't let it fall.
Well, listen, I've got to cut in there. I'll tell you for why. We're going off the subject of now. We're going to play a song, David. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm coming right back to you. And just think about this while the Beatles are on. Do you like the Beatles?
Oh yeah.
And it's back in the USSR. So you just think about this. What's your greatest? This is American greatest cultural achievement. How about that? Okay.
Oh, good. Okay.
I love it anyway. So have a little bit of Beatles and back in the USSR.
The best in 60s and 70s music, plus a little bit of history. Tune into Frank Carlyle every Monday at 8 p.m. here, only on Mersey Radio.
Well, that was the Beatles there, giving us a little break. And Mark Kinnish said, I totally agree with you there, Frank, and the rest of the panel by saying about picking on Liverpool. Every time riots are mentioned, it's just Liverpool, nowhere else. So anyway, thanks for that, Mark. So what we've got now is this. We've got the likes of great cultural achievements. And I think I put David on the spot by saying, what you think the greatest cultural achievement is. Now, don't forget, you had Ford, didn't you, and the cars.
Yeah.
You had music. You had the Wright brothers and the plane. Where would we be today without the plane?
NASA.
NASA, the space thing and everything else. But I think someone will come in and go like, what about Yuri Gagarin? You see,
Oh, but I mean, NASA's an overall organisation.
That's what I was going to say. Is I think NASA was a reactionary thing, it wasn't a proactive thing at all in the United States. It was, oh my God, the Russians are beating us. We can't let that happen. But I mean, very cynically, and don't take this too seriously, but I wonder if the cheeseburger doesn't go right up there.
Yeah, why not? Yeah,
the McDonald's brothers, that trumps it all.
Or chop suey.
Supersize, everything.
Yeah,
that phrase.
We got plenty of supersized Americans, don't we? The Walmart scooter, that's it. But, I mean, in terms of, I don't know if it's fair to say greatness in terms of like a cultural achievement, but in terms of the widest reach, it was the American embrace of television. Yes. Because, we were talking about a little bit on the break about film and cinema, and that's true, but you have to leave your house to go to that. Whereas the television, I mean, America is the birthplace of the couch potato, right? And people will sit and stare in this globe.
And with the TV becomes the TV dinners.
Well, the thing is as well, what about 1932? Radio broadcast. What was it?
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds.
Orson Welles.
Oh, yeah.
And people really thought that it was happening. It was happening.
Yeah.
You mean it wasn't?
You don't know because...
Don't tell them.
We're from the planet Zog, to be honest. All from the planet Zog, so we're all aliens you're talking to, you see, David.
Well, that's fantastic. I always wanted to meet an alien.
You've met us,
but, well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, if you want me to put something, I don't know, I think rock and roll is probably also a very American thing, because it's a fusion of all those different kinds of music like we were talking about earlier. What do you think? How would you react to that?
Well, I think so. In terms of my world, I would say American culture vis-a-vis rock and roll, with Elvis taking that sound in Memphis, taking the black sound of through Sam Phillips, through the engineer at Sun Studios who was recording black artists at the time, Arthur Big Boy Crudup doing That's Alright Mama, and then taking Junior Parker and the Blue Flames, Mystery Train, taking those kind of tracks and giving that sort of a white spin on it, has launched 1,000 bands in 1,000 countries who just wanted to be like that, and who then sort of got it wrong, like the Beatles were trying to be like that, getting it wrong, and then it exported it back to America, and then this gets exported back this way. So that cultural cross-pollination of music, to me, is the epitome of the greatness of America.
If I can just pop up with maybe a slightly different view of the great things that the States has given to the world, I'd like to question it in terms of the events or the inventions that precipitated great cultural shifts. So I think the invention of, let's say, the internet, to be a little trite about what that is, that technology, the invention of that really did come from the States, and from some of the larger corporations in the 80s that were American based, and utilizing the technologies that were breaking through from the space missions and so on. So, to me, that was an invention, a creation that then precipitated some major cultural changes around the world, and we're seeing that now in terms of social media, and we're taking over from mainstream media, and then the knock-on effect on culture that we're seeing from that, the black and whiteness of the whole world. People are either with you or against you, because what you say in social media is taken as being your opinion, absolutely. You know what I'm saying? So we're seeing major cultural shifts as a consequence of things that the United States has given to the world technologically.
Well, and look at what we're doing too. I mean, I'm chatting with you across thousands of miles on the internet. So I think there's positive to that too. But I just wanted to mention, talking about that, the history of the internet goes quite a bit further back than the 80s. Yeah. The original idea was actually a Cold War fear, and that the American military bases wanted another way to communicate, and the telephone lines had been knocked out. So they started developing this ARPANET to transmit data. And so, there's that component. I suppose it really is distinctly American. But I want to challenge that, not so much the assertion, but a question. Is a technology really a cultural thing?
It's the influence of the technology, I think.
Yeah,
because the guy who developed the internet was British. He was an Englishman. He was the inventor. I can't remember his name now.
Tim Berners-Lee.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. And so, but as you say, it's the development from, say, Wozniak and Jobs and everybody else that's behind that that's actually brought that forward. And social media, is it a positive thing? There's a lot more negatives to it, as far as I can see, than positives. But as you say, it's an influence on culture. But look at the heritage, look back where this all develops from. And I think, as Paul says, it is music, entertainment, develops further into like movies and television, and then goes into this new entertainment communication area. And the Americans have been at the forefront of it, really, since...
Well, this is it, isn't it? I'm going to go off music here, get away from it. No, I've got to, because, there's other cultural things too. It's just like social comments, isn't it, through music? It's right through music. You've got these wonderful social comments, having a go at governments, having a go at the rich, having a go at this, having a go at that. Even through racial tensions, they come up with all this wonderful stuff. So anyway, getting away from that particular thing, I said to my group last week, actually, I said, what's the only culture, and this is right to you, David, what's the only culture from year dot has gone on, and it's still prevalent today. It's still prevalent today without any change whatsoever. What would you say it was?
So you want to go from like a year
dot from the beginning, whenever it was. What's gone on? Constantly gone on, and it's never ever stopped. It's always there, every single.
So I'm going to say that the first thing that comes to mind is the Jewish culture.
Okay.
Because it's not the relative latecomer to the ancient Middle East, but it through all manner of oppression and of course the Holocaust and everything else, the Jewish culture has persisted. So that's my immediate reaction. What did your group say?
It's interesting, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the manna from, manna. Thing is, what I said it was war. It's never ever changed. There's always...
So conflict.
Yeah, conflict. No matter what. From the year dot, there's always conflict. You've got to look at it, the old picture of everything. No religion, no nothing, and it's just war. And people say that wars are through religion, and if they are, there's no getting away from it, because they'll always find an excuse or a scapegoat to go to war. Then, once wheels started to turn, and the wheels needed to be oiled, oil came into conflict. And that was it. And it still hasn't changed today. Now it's the dollar, it's the money, and that's pure, unadulterated greed that leads to the likes of wars.
So I'm going to ask, though, then, are you asserting that war is its own unique culture, that it stands independent of anything else as a culture?
Well, what would you think?
I think a war is a byproduct of other cultures. You have to have difference in order to have a war. If everybody's all the same.
No, precisely. No matter where you come from a caveman. Let's talk about a caveman. If a caveman wanted a woman, all of a sudden he's got this sexuality, and he sees a female, and with another caveman, the female, he goes over and bonks her on the head, and drags them off to the cave. That's what I mean. It's the violence. It's the conflict.
I think where David's coming from there, and obviously we're coming from, it's quite. I can see both, because I have to admit, I think the main reason for humanity is to propagate your seed and to carry on the next generation and to push on your DNA. And so therefore it's out of that comes the culture of survival. It's not really culture, it's a definition really of survival, and then power, and making sure that you're in the most prominent position to carry on your progeny and to make sure they have the best life possible in comparison with other people, and you overrule on other people. So as Dave says about, therefore that brings about, that's caused by cultures conflicting against each other, I think that's probably more direct a viewpoint. Dave?
Yeah, David, if you don't mind.
Sorry, David.
But yeah, I guess because I don't know that I see violence as standing independent of another culture. I guess that's all I'm really driving at. I think it's a little bit oversimplistic to say that every caveman operated on the idea of, me one woman, that's.
We think that might just be Frank.
Of course. Or Fred Flintstone. Michael Carter, he's texted in and he said, well, tell David Johnson, is it because of Fred Flintstone that all this has come about? It's on bedrock.
Yeah, okay, so the honeymooners on television and animation, okay. But, see, I guess I looked a little bit more at the... some of the prehistoric cultures, in Europe at least, and every once in a while I get to teach a class on goddesses and women in the ancient world, and it's really just a fascinating class. But there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that there were large-scale conflicts like that. I mean, there were diverse cultures, but there's not a lot of evidence. And I was not saying that there wasn't conflict, but there's not the evidence that there is later after... kind of a successive wave of new cultures comes into Europe. So I guess I'm just not sure I'm convinced that violence or warfare is its own independent cultural entity. So I'm willing to be open-minded about it now.
Okay, well, I've just got to mention Michael Carter, who's tunes in, and also Keith Telwell and his lovely mother June. They're tuning in. They're listening to the show, and they said, this is fantastic. Why can't there be more shows like this? So thank you very much for that. And Ed wants to come in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something controversial, if I may. But, far be it from me to say anything controversial. This will probably raise the roof. I'm going to make a statement which I think could cause a riot. The issue of, you mentioned before that you felt that conflict was something that was the expression of differences between cultures, and I kind of agree with that. And John has gone through that debate with you as well. But I just want to say that conflict, if it's the culture of groups or large group of people, of types of people who've existed since the year dot. So let's call them elite, or let's call them Illuminati, let's call them what we will. Those people that some imagine rule the planet and have done forever, in one form or another. If their culture is to control the planet, then conflict is their means of doing so. And so conflict to them isn't the expression of differences between cultures. It's their method of controlling the population of the planet. That's just an assertion. Have you got a view on that?
Yeah. Well, I'll jump in on that just for a minute, because I wonder if that's not... There's an inherent assumption that that's the way it has been since, forever, that there must be a leading group. And at least... Go back to the Native Americans for a minute. It's a bit of a misnomer to say that there's a chief in a tribal group or in a nation. There are elders, and there are some that are maybe more esteemed, more respected than others. But by and large, especially in the hunter-gatherer groups that persisted well into the 19th century, it really was a communal decision-making process. And so, one of the many treaties that the American government tried to get people to sign so they could break it, they said, send all your decision makers, and like 7,000 Indians showed up to this treaty signing because they were the decision makers. So I'm not sure that it's entirely fair to always presume from truly the year dot that there is that Illuminati group.
Well, it was only see, when I said the year dot, no matter how you look at it, I was just I'm not even saying paraphrase, because I wasn't paraphrasing, but you can go back to the hitting over the head, and all right, it's exaggerated, but you do have that particular sort of conflict between these, shall we say, people, Asian people. It's just carried on from then. That's all that I mean. And John wants to say something.
Yeah, I think in that case, it's not the human race as a general genetic identification or culture. You've got specific groups that have that culture. For example, the hierarchy of the Persian military, the Prussian military, and obviously going back to Sparta, where the military was the culture, as part of their raison d'etre. But to say that humanity has a culture of war, I'd say you could say that therefore the basis of it is love and war to create that conflict. I don't think people go out there because otherwise we'd all go out and fighting each other all the time.
It's like war and peace then, isn't it? Yeah. It really is. But no matter how you look at it, war is war, and war's always been prevalent throughout my lifetime, throughout my grandparents'
as a means to an end, though. As a means to an end.
As a means to end, but it never ends. It will never ever end. Anyway, what we're going to do, we're going for a break, David. So you're coming back to us, aren't you, after the break?
If you'd like, sure.
Oh, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So we're going to change from war now, okay? And what do you think, through the cultural, your culture, the American culture, what's the greatest achievement in engineering and the sciences? Think about it, and I'll give you mine, and Paul will give you his, and our lovely Laura will give her his, and John his, and of course Ed. Okay, so we'll see you after the break.
Yeah, fair game. Let me ask, if you will, before we go.
Go on.
I want to know what you lot think is Britain's greatest cultural achievement.
Oh, we'll tell you that. It's Liverpool. End of.
After the break.
After the break. Right. No, we'll tell you about the greatest cultural thing. And I might surprise you, actually. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
The best in 60s and 70s music, plus a little bit of history. Tune into Frank Carlyle every Monday at 8 p.m. here, only on Mersey Radio.
And do you know what? Gilchrist just snatched the last biscuit. Snatched the last biscuit, and I well, that's it. When is he on again? Jason, will you let me know when he's on again? Anyway, so we can hide the biscuits. Anyway, look at John O'Hare, he's coming in, everything's going.
There was one left, and it's mine.
It's mine.
That's the culture of war, Frank.
That's the culture, that's how war starts.
No, you can have it on the pizza maker.
No, you haven't.
No, I'm diabetic,
You've
you can kill me.
It. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to ask our lovely Laura, what do you think, Laura? Like all this cultural stuff and everything else. I'm not saying invention or whatever, but, through a women's sort of thing, right through, what do you think that is being achieved by women? And I'll tell you what I think as well.
I was thinking about this just a couple of minutes ago, and I've got a few answers, I think. One was that, like, equality kind of voting thing. Okay. It's not really an invention, but it's kind of a...
No.
I suppose it's more of like a progression kind of thing. The other one is hidden heels.
Is it
I don't know who invented them, but Maria just popped into my head. She wears these when we do gigs, when we play. She's the bass player, and she wears these hidden heels. They're like pumps, Converse pumps.
Oh, right.
But they've got your heel, so they're like a, I don't know how important it is in the great scheme of things, but it's a help anyway.
Well, that's it, because I reckon the likes. I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what mine is about women, for women. Shall I tell you? And it came about in the 19th century. It came about in the 19th century, and it was writing. It was writing. Women, you know, through, okay, Jane Austen, but one of the greatest of all writers was Mary Shelley. Not only that, then the Brontes came, because you had Mary Evans, who went under the pseudonym of George Eliot, so that she could be recognised, you know, as a writer. Fantastic writings. Elizabeth Gaskell, and they are the four. Mary Godwin is a great heroine of mine, along with Mary Bamber. Have you got any idea who Mary Bamber was? She was a great socialist. Now, I know David won't know this particular thing, but Mary Bamber was the mother of Bessie Braddock. So I reckon that, you know, women, 19th century novelists, that was the greatest door that opened for the female girls, to be honest. What do you think, Ed? Do you reckon?
I think
you're looking at
absolutely, me. You know, being allowed in the first place, you know, fighting for the position and being allowed to join in with literary activities. Without that, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Bessie Braddock, for those who don't know, I guess, you know, she was a woman in her own right, as equal with men of her period. You know, she was a representative of the people.
Yep.
So without those forerunners, there would be none of that. You know, today would be very, very different.
And they are the forerunners.
And in fact, if you just to finish with that, there are cultures in the world, and we know them, that are still back there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you know, this is it. They were the forerunners, as you said. I'm going to go back to David here, and I'm going to go around the group, and I'm going to ask them what do you think that their particular thing was, you know, our greatest achievement. And I'm going to say the Industrial Revolution, and I'll tell you why. All right, they reckon that it started in 1767, but I go before then, and I'll tell you when it was. And it happened here in Liverpool, and it happened in 1715 with the opening of the dock, the first wet dock in the entire world. It controlled water, and the dock system from then on went just right around the world. And I think that that's one of the greatest. All right, it's an invention, but it's a great cultural invention, and that's my opinion. That's just mine. And I'm going to go to Paul Kappa and ask him, what do you think? What's yours? Then I'll get to David.
Well, I think, Frank, it's a huge question, that because you consider like all the massive inventions, but I'm going to go for the Model T Ford.
Brilliant.
Just because it's such a huge moment, not because he invented a car, but because he democratized the creation of cars, without getting into the type of fellow Henry Ford was, because that's a different story. But I mean, looking at what his achievement was. I suppose even the fact that he started paying his workers a lot more than anybody else, albeit with a view to them buying one of his cars. So it was method in his madness. But as a piece of engineering, which was outstandingly simple to build, and that made motor vehicles available to almost everybody, I think that's a huge step.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
You've got to pick one, haven't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. What do you think? What's your one, John?
Well, I'd have the tendency, if you're saying about practical things, Industrial Revolution, just, you know, stopping 2,000 years of gradual development, and the last sort of 300 years being like amazing development from man being on a boat to go into a steam train to now go into space. The other thing would be the English language, because the English language, without it, you've seen the propagators across the world, communication, you know, the development of engineering, architecture, etc., through the language and the mathematics. We'll look greatly to the English language itself. I mean, look at Shakespeare, look at the literacy that's come out. So I would say Industrial Revolution and the English language combined really would be the two main things.
Do we have a definitive point that we think we can define the English language historically?
It's about 2,000. It's about 2,000 years, isn't it? Do you reckon it starts developing from a Germanic, Indo-European language, moving through? There's obviously influences. I mean, 80% of it is French, really, in a derivative, and then a little bit of Norwegian in there, and whatever. Because the court language didn't change to English until around about it was the 18th century, 17th century, and even then it was in hotspots with German and French before that, and Latin. So,
well, you've only got to read Canterbury Tales, haven't you?
Sure,
you can't understand them. You really can't understand them. When you go back, we speak with what you call a low German tar. It's very Germanic. Where you say, ich bin nicht ein Ausländer, ich bin Deutsch. It's a very aggressive language. Yet, if you can't understand English, we're the very same. It's a very aggressive language.
Most difficult language to learn, allegedly, in the world.
It is. But, yeah, because can I just come in? I've got to ask lovely Laura, what do you think is the greatest achievements in engineering and our sciences?
Paul's dropping me hints here. Before I say anything, I'm just got to come back to this women I've invented and I can't get words out here. Apparently, well, the ancient Mesopotamian women brewed beer.
We got there, yeah.
I knew I'd say that wrong. See, Paul's written it down for me here, and I knew I'd say it wrong. But apparently they were the first women to brew beer. So there you go.
Well, that's amazing.
So where would men be, though?
Exactly where we do be today, especially Ed. Ed, what's yours?
I was going to say, I mean, that there are some extremely famous women in scientific history, but what I wanted to contribute to this particular piece was, it's easy to talk about engineering inventions and scientific inventions, but I think behind all of those things are the thoughts given to us by the greats. So even go back as far as Archimedes and the old laughing story about he jumped out the bath and said Eureka, but from that people were able to understand better how things float. Steel ships float because of the science that his statement was the basis of. And things fall on our heads, and you can refer back to Newton, and he would say gravity, so I think the great things that precipitated change in our world, and a lot of it being cultural changes too, so go back to what Paul said about motor cars and so on. They've created massive cultural changes in the way people live and the way they view life, but they go right back to individuals who came up with these theorems from long ago.
So you're talking about the ancient Greeks?
Absolutely. And Newton wasn't quite Greek.
No, I know that. Well, but you're talking about Archimedes.
You go way back.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Galileo, you could argue, was thinking about gravity before Newton did.
Well, that's right, because when you look at
they locked him up for that.
Well, they did, because they said he was against God.
Yeah.
He said he was against God, and he said that the earth revolved around the sun, and he went, whoa, heretic. So the thing is, with Galileo, I think his greatest invention, what was his greatest invention, Galileo?
I would say the globe, was it the globe?
Well, they say the globe, but you know what it was? It was the telescope.
The telescope, yeah.
I think that was the greatest of all inventions by him, by Galileo. And anyway, I'm going over to David. David, what you reckon's the American greatest engineering or scientific achievement?
Well, let me just mention something real quick. So Galileo did not invent the telescope; he just pointed it up. He refined it, but it was invented by a Dutchman. Can't remember his name.
Yeah, that's early.
But
like the X-ray as well. Go on. Argue with that.
Yeah. So one of the people that I didn't catch who it was, but he was talking about Ford, and I think, the Model T is what it is, but it's only possible because of the assembly line. And so I would argue that what Ford contributed is as much as anything the moving assembly line that allowed the Model T to be the democratic car that you were talking about. So I think that's really, really important, because everything's mass-produced now, and it's mass-produced because we can do that kind of rapid-fire assembly.
I think what Paul was saying there, though, David, was that, it was the conveyor belt. It was the mass production. That's what I think Paul was going on about. And it was there. It was in America. It was at Ford. And there's nothing better than mass production.
Yeah, okay. I would also throw out that I think the microchip, the computer chip, which is also an American invention, I think that's really responsible for a lot of things, because without it, you had computer technology before you had the chip, but it was insanely complicated. You had to go in and do all this really delicate hand soldering on individual transistors, and so the internet and the word processing and everything that we do, that's because we got these chips. So I would offer those two, because you're never going to get just one answer from me.
I wanted to go back to what Laura was saying about ancient Mesopotamian women brewing beer. The thing is, we can't give them names, because I don't think women through history get much of a roll call, do they? They've probably been far more influential than they ever get name checked for, and so I think it's very difficult when you say, what have women done, because it's nearly always, until the last couple of 100 years, the men that get the plaudits for it. And of course, we all know behind every great man there's a woman.
Yeah, that's what they say, isn't it? But yeah, that's why I just suggested the hidden heels with a bit of fun, but with engineering thrown in as well. I was thinking about the escalator, the automatic stairs.
No.
Maybe.
No, the automatic
they're everywhere,
stairs.
aren't they?
I suppose David will come in here and say, no, it wasn't. But
I don't know if it was English or American or whoever.
But what it is, the escalator, the very first escalator, was in Liverpool, and it was an absolutely fantastic invention, an electrified escalator. You're not going to say it was in Macy's, are you, David?
Because I don't know that. No, I'm not going to say that.
Right, there you go then. But anyway, it's just what. Don't you think, though? So we've only got 5 minutes to go before we go over to the lovely Joe Whittaker, who's over there in your part of the world, Hollywood. Now, albeit that we've been talking about culture, I'm going to talk about now when you're coming on again, and it's about one of our most favourite queens, shall we say, Elizabeth I. Well, she's not one of my favourite queens, I'm being honest, but are you looking forward to that particular show? David?
Yeah, you broke up there, but I've got my copy of the Bisley Boy on its way, and
okay.
I have done a little bit of looking into the background.
Okay.
I have come across the Bram Stoker account that seems to be a precursor to some of this, and here's what I'm going to say is I'm going to.
And Arthur Conan Doyle, by the way, as well. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say I'm going to approach this with a very open mind, but I have some doubts about some of the bits of the premise that I've read so far. But again, I want to read the book and I want to really look at it, carefully and critically before we talk. That'll be fun in September, though. That'll be very different.
Oh, it will be. It will be, David. It's been great. So, what did you think? To sum up, to recap on tonight's show, what stood out for you when we were talking about cultural differences?
I guess I think what stands out to me is that we've all got very different opinions, and that's okay. That maybe that's part of that problem, though, is there's not an easy, simple answer to it. So, I want to say this too. Something that was really curious to me. Nobody mentioned John Locke in your chatting, and I really think some credit, maybe a great deal of credit, is due to the embracing of kind of the modern concept of liberty and government to John Locke. So I think that needs to just be on the table there.
Yeah, but we can all go to these philosophers, great philosophers. You can go to Thomas Hobbes, and he summed everything up. He said, "Man is nasty, brutish, and short." In other words, he's a nasty person. He's a brutish person, and he's short in temper, and that's violence stems from it. And this is what he was talking about during the 17th century. And yet you get the likes of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who turned around and said, "Man is born free, however he is everywhere in chains, and everyone's always trying to break away from the chains, no matter what kind of era that you're living in." So you can go to all these wonderful people and their wonderful philosophy.
I like John Stuart Mill myself.
Well, John Stuart Mill was, absolutely brilliant, because John Stuart Mill actually said, people are only told half truths. If they are told the full truths, they will have they will argue, and they will have an opinion, and they will argue. And that was John Stuart Mill, and this is what it's been about tonight.
That's what we were just doing too.
Yeah,
well, this is so his philosophy came through, and it comes through every time. It comes through every single time. People are only told half truths, and if they're told the full truth, they will have an opinion and they will argue, and it's as simple as that.
And if man is brutish, then that's why we got Laura on the show.
Well, this is it. You see, to calm us all down. To calm us all down. See, how Laura, I'll tell you a little bit about Laura, David. Laura is, to let all her frustration out and anger and everything else, she plays drums in the amazing Kappa band, and this is what it's all about. So she's a wonderful artiste as well, besides being a lovely person. And, so I'm going to go over to Paul. Paul, what did you think about tonight's show?
I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've learned things as well, and it's thought provoking, because David mentioned before, to bring that a full cycle thing, he mentioned about culture and the most enduring culture, and he mentioned the Jewish culture, and I thought about that for a long time myself, and I thought that he might well have a very good point there, because if you think about the Aztecs or the Egyptians and the Persians and the Mesopotamians brewing their beer, and the Romans and the Britons and the Greeks and the Magi and possibly the Hindus, I mean, you go through everybody, but this culture of the Jewish culture has been omnipresent, and
survived,
very powerful, institution,
and single-minded.
Yeah.
Oh, single-minded. Yeah. Well, why would you say that, Ed?
I think if we read about the values of the Jewish people,
are you talking about Zionism now?
You could say Zionism. That's one of the single values. I mean, Zionism, I suppose, originated way back a couple of thousand years ago, didn't it? Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking more than that. I'm thinking that the values as a culture of people, what they believe in, what they stand for. But if I could maybe just sum up for myself for tonight. Yeah,
I'm going to ask you this. Be waiting for you to finish.
What I think is that as a culture is a really, really important part of human life on this planet, and the danger I see in our future is I think it's a rush towards a single culture. So you see that with the United States from the Revolution, so the North versus the South, the Civil War, the North versus the South, and trying to make that into a common culture. We've heard David just saying before how it's a patchwork, but there's still that thing about driving them together to be the same. The European Union, drive them together to be the same. They talk about not destroying the cultures of the countries, but they are destroying the cultures of the countries. So to me, if you get a one world culture, we've failed as humans. But the people who control us have won. So culture and diversity should be celebrated and protected at all times.
Okay, that's, to finish on that. David, you there, David?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, no, you weren't. You sneaked off, didn't you? You were having a coffee and a donut.
No, we're having a Skype issue, so.
So, to sum up, David, have you enjoyed it?
Oh, absolutely. I always enjoy this. These are days I look forward to.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, don't forget, next month, the Bisley Boy, Elizabeth I, yes, and the same panel will be around because it's one of Paul Kappa's exciting, shall we say, things, projects or whatever.
I do. I like Queens.
He likes Queens.
It's a good part of New York.
I'm very much looking forward to it in September.
Oh, thank you very much, David, and thanks for your input tonight. Absolutely brilliant, and we'll speak to you next month.
That's great. Thank you then.
No, bye. Thank you. Bye-bye, David.
Bye, David. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
So that's David. So he's great, isn't he?
Fab.
All the way from Colorado. Skyping there, and absolutely amazing. Anyway, we're going over to... no, we're not going over to Jo, unfortunately, isn't she there? She's on. No, shall we go for a song? Yeah, rather. And he keeps saying to me... I don't know what he keeps saying to me, because I don't have my distant glasses on. I've got my reading glasses on, and Jason's a Blair, so I don't know what he's miming to me. Is she on? He's going. So anyway, it's a song. We're going to play a song, and it's hello, right?
I can see him quite well. I can't repeat what he's saying though.
Oh well, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Anyway, it's Sorrow by the wonderful Mersey Beats.
The best in 60s and 70s music, plus a little bit of history. Tune into Frank Carlyle every Monday at 8 p.m. here, only on Mersey Radio.
Oh, wasn't that absolutely brilliant by Billy Kinsley and Tony Crane, the Mersey Beats? Absolutely fantastic. Sorrow. And Bowie did the follow-up to it, which was absolutely amazing as well. So... no matter who sings that, I can even sing it. Ed Gilchrist can sing it. He'd be wonderful as well. So, anyway, we're going to mention the Pussyfoot's album, Religion, and it's now available. So if you go on to Pussyfoot, that's why couldn't he? It's P-Z-Z-Y-F-O-O-T, Pussyfoot, that is, P-Z-Z-Y-F. O-O-T, Pussyfoot.com for more information. Absolutely brilliant. Or look at our website and you'll be able to pick it up from there. Pussyfoot. And are they coming on? They are, aren't they? Pussyfoot. Monty Connor. Yeah.
We spoke to Jamira.
We spoke to Jamira, yeah. Yeah, that's right. We did speak to Jamira. What a fantastic band they are, anyway. So, have we got the wonderful Jo, and she's going to be sorted here and come right on to us, and we'll be talking to Jo a little bit later. But anyway, next week we've got John Thompson on, and he's the author of Job, Liverpool legend, and Andy Gamble from Searching. He's on with us, and also a fellow by the name of Ian O'Brien. He'll be on with us. Absolutely fantastic fella is Ian. And I'd just like to mention Matty and Liz. They're listening in. And my neighbours, they said, Frank, we'll be listening in tonight. And I said, will you? She said, yeah, we love listening in. So anyway, it's good evening to, well, it's near the end now, isn't it? It's good evening to anyway. Matty and Liz who are listening in. Besides all the others, the likes of Alan Hodgson, who's listening in also, and his lovely daughter Nicola, they always listening in. Anyway, getting right over now to Jo, and Jo is there for us. Hello, Jo.
Greetings from Hollywood.
How are you?
I'm very well, surviving in the extreme temperatures we find ourselves in, but that's okay.
I know you survive anywhere, Jo. You would survive anywhere. Anyway, we've been talking about culture, and what we were talking about is your type of culture right now, because you mix with the stars and everything else, and you've got a fantastic cultural lifestyle. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I do live in quite a diverse environment, and yes, there's lots of influences from the outside and inside, and indeed Hollywood, in a way, controls a lot of the messages we get in regard to diversity and culture. And we've got to remember, 1 in 4 Americans are immigrants, and yeah, I would agree totally.
So do you think, like, with the culture of, say, like, movies, as they call them over there, movies, that it's very cultural to give to other countries, you know, no matter how you look at it, you know, these action films or even true life films and fantasy, everything.
Yep. I think Stalin once said, if I could control the medium of the American motion picture, I would need nothing else to convert the entire world to communism.
Well, there you go, and that's just nods. So what do you think of that?
I think, well, we know that the media is the way to control the world's views of things, and I think Hollywood, certainly in its heyday, was the greatest medium for communicating.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the secret to Hollywood's success. You know, success has a lot to do having been founded by immigrants in America, and I think Warner was off the boat when he did his cultural, the stories he told in the studios and films and all the rest of it. I mean, it's funny how it can control a lot of the environmental reactions to what's going on, you know, globally with business, terrorism. And, you know, you bring out a movie and you can just switch a whole way of thinking.
Do you know what, though, Joe? I watched a film the other night, and it was called something about New Jersey. Anyway, it was about the broadcast. Cracking little film. And it was about the broadcast by Orson Welles in 1932 about War of the Worlds. And they had a small power cut. And then the radio came on. So they never caught, like, now this is a play by H.G. Wells and it's going to be presented by Mr. Orson Welles. They missed all that. So when they were just talking, and all of a sudden they would break off and, hey, there's something landing, oh my God, there's something. Absolutely brilliant, because it was the play. It was like the actual play. But these were believing it. They really thought that it was an emergency broadcast. And you should see it. It's absolute. You found out, and it's a true story. You actually found out who were the heroes and who were the cowards. And you know, you'd expect the heroes, shall we say, when the film first starts, you know, these men of action, and hey, you know, this is going to happen, but they turned out to be the cowards. Do you understand? So it's a fantastic film, and this is the way people portray Hollywood, and how Hollywood portrays people. They can either up you or down you. What do you think?
Absolutely. I absolutely totally agree. I mean, you can just totally switch it over, and to have that massive effect on the population. And, you know, let's face it, I think America still hold that power, that torch of being able to globally send out a message to change the way of thinking. And you're just a great example, you know. People really believe. They were rushing out and hiding for their lives.
Yeah. That seems to be very prevalent with the American sort of culture as it is, because only is it about 4% of the American population go abroad, and so a lot of things that are fed to them in the media, Fox News is a slightly dangerous example, people actually go along with it and believe the information that's given to them. Frank said about movies, look at the famous U-5701, was it, where the U-boat, the Second World War, and it changes history, because according to that movie, which a lot of Americans believed, the Americans were the first ones to pick out Enigma machines. Of course, by the time the Americans first picked up an Enigma machine, the British were selling them off in car boot sales. You know, it's a complete mess.
Absolutely. It's interesting in movies how, globally all the British guys are the bad guys.
Yeah.
You noticed that, yeah, you've noticed everyone. And that's why I won't watch anything, believe it or not, with a British person in. I will not watch it if it's going to be the good guy versus the bad guy, because you know who the bad guy is. And there are some certain, like racial things. If there's a bank heist or a murder, and you know that it's not going to be that certain person, because they're terrified to say, "Oh, it's him." Do you understand? Yeah. So that's why I'm careful when I watch my films.
Well, there was a third film come out called The Enigma, and I think it had that Benedict Cumberbatch in it, or something. Yeah, and he was like the sort of the main fella in it.
Yeah.
That was good.
Shireen, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, as Michael Carter said, he's just sent a message through. Americans always save the world. So would you go along with that, Joe and Laura?
In the movies, yes, of course.
I'm going to be a bit controversial and say that it's going to sound bad, but whenever there's like in the movies that I've seen, there always seems to be, like, from the Americans, a bit of a preempted celebration. Like, it's like, don't cheer just yet, because something bad's going to happen any minute now. Just hang on a minute. You can cheer in a minute. Just wait.
Absolutely, I hate it.
And I hate to say that.
The most popular video game was something called Grand Theft Auto, and it's one of the world's most popular games. It was developed in Edinburgh, but it's played in fictional cities that were all recognisable American. And to say America is a global visual language is an understatement.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, it's not just British people who are portrayed as baddies. Max von Sydow, who was Swedish, was always portrayed as the most German of all Germans.
Yeah. Anton Diffring.
Brilliant German actor. Brilliant German actor, Anton Diffring. Go on.
I've got to say that, I said earlier that the movies in the heyday were the real media power, and I'm just thinking they even are today. The master of propaganda, and you can watch movies that look like the exposing truth. Lots of movies about exposing truth, and they become like cult movies. But then there's other things, like there's a movie just being released on DVD later this year called Land of Mine. Land of Mine tells a story from the end of the Second World War that actually makes the British look like they were committing a huge war crime. And it's based on truth. So if you haven't seen or read about that, look up Land of Mine. It's on DVD later in the year, and it is a fantastic piece of history that if it had been released at the time, if we knew at the end of the Second World War, there would have been absolute uproar about the Geneva Convention. So there are true things that come out there, but it was hidden.
A bit like 9/11, in that there was a total outcry when 9/11 happened, and then when we went to the war of Iraq, same story, right?
Yeah.
We all knew it was, very interesting.
Well, this is it, you see, Joe, and it says it's wonderful to have you on, as usual, because we all love you. We all do.
I feel the love.
Well, this is it, you see, Joe. But anyway, Joe, will you join us again next week?
Of course. Try and stop me.
Okay, that's absolutely fantastic. Unless you're in traffic somewhere, sometimes
I'm
caught up.
We'll see about that.
Try and get some, try and get some gossip for us for next week. See what's happening.
I will.
You know what I mean? We know Zsa Zsa Gabor's dead. We know she's passed on, but if you can get us some wonderful stuff, is that okay?
Always. I'll do my best. I'm always good at that.
And Michael Carter's sent in a message, and he says, "I'm in Dublin at the moment, and I just wait for Joe to come on." How about that? So there you go, Joe. You've got a big fan in Dublin there. Okay, so Joe. So next week. Peace and love to you as well. Bye bye now.
Bye, Joe.
Bye, Joe. Bye. I was going to say, if she can't, get any real gossip, she could make some up.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Fake news.
That's what we want.
We're trying to get away from all this fake news. Anyway, I've got to say a big thank you to David Johnson, who's been on all night, most probably. Well, he has, hasn't he? I've got to say a big thank you to Paul Kappa.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me.
And I've got to say a big thank you to the lovely Laura Gilchrist.
Thanks, Frank.
To the lovely... Oh, well, it can't be lovely, can I? He's sitting there like a cyclist, isn't he? Right out of, the Tour de France with his orange thing on.
Oui.
Anyway, it's John O'Hare.
Good night, Francis.
Good night, my good friend John O'Hare, fellow historian, brilliant historian. And there's another brilliant fella I think he's absolutely wonderful, is Mr. Ed Gilchrist, and thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Good night.
And I've got to just say this to Jason, because without Jason Pennington, the producer, the show wouldn't go on. We wouldn't have a cup of tea and we wouldn't have any biscuits, and it's till next week, people. It's me, Frank Carlyle, for Mersey Radio, thanking every single one of you listeners all around the globe, to say a big thank you. God's willing, see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.